Okay, you may be seated. Okay, let the record reflect that the defendant is present along with counsel for the defendant, Assistant State Attorney. Both sides ready to proceed. All right, let's return the witness to the stand, and after he's back on the stand, we'll bring the jury in. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Did you heed all of my previous admonition during the noon recess? All right, state and the defense both recognize the presence of the jury.
Yes, sir.
You may continue, Mr. Ashton.
Mr. Hanson, I believe where we left off before lunch, you were making your way back to the area of interest. When you arrived at the area where the remains were, can you kind of describe the area? In other words, in terms of its vegetation, things of that sort.
Yes, sir. It was heavily overgrown and undergrown with there was a rotten log, there was a lot of vines, there was a lot of undergrowth. It took me, even when I got to the area and Detective Miller tried to point out the things that were pertinent, it took me a while to orient it, to pick them up. The photos that you showed going in were photos of the area, but I hadn't noticed until we got in there and looking. So it was very difficult to see. Once you picked it up, then it was much easier. But initially, it was very difficult to discern.
What did someone have to point it out to you? The skull to take. There
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If I may show the witness state's exhibit CH for identification.
Right.
Let me just make sure. Yes. Can you see that photograph?
Yes, I can.
Was this one of the initial photographs you took upon being shown where the remains were, but before major clearing had occurred?
No, it isn't. This is one. This was after some clearing had been done,
All right.
Taken from the opposites. I take that back. Some of the area had been cleared a little bit, but this was maybe the second or third photograph that was taken.
So within the process of clearing of that.
Indeed.
All right. And does it fairly accurately depict what it shows?
Yes, it is.
This time, Your Honor, moving down to State's Exhibit CH.
No objection.
We received an evidence that states number.
I publish.
You may publish.
All right. Now, from what perspective is this photograph taken, Mr. Hanson?
I'm standing. If you look at the lower portion of the photograph, there's what looks to be a rotten log. I'm on the other side of that, and we're looking across. I'm not 100% sure what the direction was. The orientation was a little tough in there, but we were looking across so that what looked like to be the skull was on the left-hand side, and then the plastic bags and some of the other things were over on the right.
I'm going to put a little line here. This is the log you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Where just
Indeed.
The line. All right. And are you essentially directly above the skull or approximately?
Just a little bit behind it, but very close.
Right. Can you see in this photograph was there duct tape on or near the skull?
I'm not sure that I was able to appreciate the duct tape right at that point. These were, again, a series of photographs that we take as we go in so that we have orientation and background. So I was more interested in making sure that I got everything in there than doing a close examination of the scene itself.
Now, after that, this photograph, of course, you did have a chance to examine it more thoroughly and
Yes,
identify.
sir.
Okay. Was there duct tape on or near the skull?
It appeared to be duct tape from what I could see, yes.
Can you point out on this photograph where that is?
I would think that it's kind of right around in this area.
So this bit of gray we see just above the skull in the photograph?
Actually, it's not above the skull. It's in front of the skull.
In the photograph.
Oh, yes. Yes, sir.
The upper part
Right.
of the photograph. I don't
Indeed, yes.
On top of it. Okay. And, all right, let's go on. Excuse me. Now, once this photograph was taken, did you, with the assistance of the crime scene investigators, clear all of the vegetation above the skull and the other items associated with it?
Not right away. Additional photographs were taken, but at some point then we went ahead and started to clear it out so that we could see it better.
How long were you actually at the scene between arrival and when you left with the remains?
I'd have to say it was 3 or 4 hours.
So we're condensing 3 or 4 hours into
Yes, we
a
are.
short period of time. All right. May I have State's Exhibit CI? Right. Can you see State's Exhibit CI?
Yes.
Is that a photograph of the scene with the vines cleared away to appreciate everything on the ground and its relation to each other?
The vines are cleared away, and you can see that the log that was down there has been removed.
And does it fairly accurately depict the scene with those alterations you've discussed?
Yes, sir, it does.
This time, Your Honor, moving to State's Exhibit CI.
No objection, Your Honor.
We received an evidence the state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, I believe you indicated before we published this, you put a blue line at the bottom. Is that approximately where the log was?
Yes, sir.
But the log had been removed.
Yes, it was moved over to the side.
And again, you indicated that some vines had been removed.
Yes, sir.
Was anything cleared at this point from ground level, or was it all the stuff above?
No, it was just things that were above it that were hindering our ability to visualize what was down there.
So with respect to the things that are on the ground, is everything in the same position it was when you got there?
Yes, sir.
If we could move on to State's Exhibit CJ. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, I do.
And what is, let me clear that annotation. What is this a photograph of?
This is a close-up of the skull.
Now, is this taken after the vines have been cleared away, the log has been removed?
Yes, sir.
But has any of the ground material been disturbed in any way?
Not at all. It was just a close-up of the area after it had been cleared up a little bit, but nothing had been moved.
This time, Your Honor, moving to, then does it fairly accurately depict the scene? At that
Yes,
point?
it does.
This time, Your Honor, moving to evidence, State's Exhibit C.
No objection, Your Honor.
It will be received in evidence the state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, tell me, if you will, sort of describe the angle at which you took this photograph of what you were attempting to do.
This photograph was taken from the opposite side of where the other ones were. We moved from, for discussion's sake, the one side where the log was, we moved outside of the area and came into it from another point so that we could visualize the other side without having to step over anything or disturb anything. So now this photograph was taken from the other side, the other perspective, where you couldn't see the front of the skull from that other vantage point. We moved so that you could visualize the skull without having to move anything.
Now, at what height is the camera when this is taken? And did you?
It probably wasn't 2.5 feet off the ground.
And how did you accomplish that?
By the camera we have is a digital camera, and it has a screen in the back that you can flip out and rotate so that you don't have to stay behind the camera as you're watching it the whole time. So we were able to, or I was able to go ahead and bring that camera down and rotate the screen up so that I could still see what the camera was seeing without having to get down onto the ground at the same level. So that's how that was accomplished.
So you're actually standing up, but you're holding the camera.
Well, I was bending down, but I was not. My face was not behind the camera because of the arrangement of the screen on the back of the camera.
Now, in this photograph, can you see the duct tape?
Yes, sir.
Now, from your observation of it, at this point, could you determine whether it appeared to be more than one piece of duct tape?
No, not at that point.
Could you circle the duct tape for us? Now, obviously, this is a two-dimensional photograph, but the tape itself, as it was sitting there, was it flat on the ground? Was it perpendicular? Was it at an angle? Could you give us that additional dimension to this photograph?
It was difficult to tell because of the hair mat and the undergrowth, the plant material that was there. To the best of my knowledge, the people that were processing the scene, including myself, had not moved anything. So that is exactly how we saw it, and we hadn't moved anything. So it was difficult to tell exactly where it was.
All right. So there was a great deal of leaf debris sort of around it.
Still.
Right. Now, we see in the photograph a portion of the duct tape. Is there a portion of the duct tape that is under the leaf debris?
We didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
But subsequently, upon moving, when you do these, you photograph everything as you find it.
Sure.
You want to record it exactly as it was found. And after you've done that, then you're in a position where you can go ahead and start to make some changes. But you want to always be able to photograph something exactly how it was found. And then, as we're doing now, then we explain that. And then, so any subsequent photographs, we can say that we had to clear some of that undergrowth and what have you away so we could see.
Now, you mentioned a hair mat. Can you show the jury in this photograph the hair mat you're talking about?
Let
me clear the tape annotation, first of all.
Okay.
So you can make a new one if you like.
Okay. It appeared, and it's what it appeared at the scene, and was subsequently learned to be true, that this area here and around here and some back here was probably hair.
And did it appear that way to you at the time?
It did.
Did it appear also that the matter on top of the skull here, sort of these strands, appeared to be hair also?
Correct.
Let me go on to State's Exhibit CK, I believe is the next one. And do you see State's Exhibit CK?
Yes, I do.
And does that fairly and accurately depict the relationship of the skull, the tape, and the bags that appear in the photograph?
Yes, it does.
This time, the Honor moved to State's Exhibit CK.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence the states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, these particular items we see in the photograph, let me just ask you, when you, as the crime scene investigator for the medical examiner's office, do you have a responsibility that's slightly different than responsibility of the crime scene investigators for the police agency?
Yes, sir. We investigate death scenes, and we are responsible for providing the information to the medical examiner regarding the way the scene looks and how it is related to the remains. The majority of times it's a full set of remains, occasionally decomposed, or in this case, skeletonized. So we need to go ahead and try and put into perspective those things that we believe are pertinent to understanding the scene and the circumstances. So we focus more on the scene itself as it relates with the remains than a lot of the broad photographs that the regular crime scene folks would take.
In terms of custody of the remains and items related to the remains, what is the protocol for that?
Okay. The Florida statute gives the medical examiner's office the authority over the remains. We work hand in hand with law enforcement. They own and control the crime scene, but we have the remains. In this particular case, one of the things that we were thinking was that there were probably remains in the bag. And we were, I'll be honest, hoping that most of the remains were in that bag because it would have made it a much simpler case rather than having to go search all over a field or, in this case, a wooded area. So we considered this potentially these bags having contained additional remains. So we looked at that as part of our jurisdiction.
So you would have, in effect, been in custody, if you will, or control over not just the skull, but the bags as well.
Right. After discussion with law enforcement, they agreed that that's probably the way it should be handled in this particular case.
Now, let's move on to State's Exhibit CL, please. Do you recognize State's Exhibit CL?
Yes, sir.
Is this an additional photograph of the skull showing the duct tape and its relationship to the bag?
Yes, sir, it is. The one plastic bag.
The one plastic bag. And does it fairly and accurately depict the scene as you saw it?
Yes, it does.
At this time, you ought to move down to State's Exhibit CL.
It will be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
And publish.
You may publish.
Now, this photograph, I want to discuss with you a little bit about the skull, its position. Was the skull, portions of the skull, beneath the level of the leaf litter or ground around it?
I'm not sure about dirt, but I can tell you that it seemed to be embedded in the vines. You can see there are vines and leaves and other ground debris, and it seemed to be embedded in that debris.
Now, it appears from the photograph that at least the front, the debris was up to about the mid-eye socket level. Is that?
It does, yes.
Is that how it was actually? Does that?
This is an accurate representation of what we saw.
And then if you can kind of demonstrate for if you can, sort of where the debris line would have been around the skull, and you can feel free to use your own skull.
Well, I can kind of do my own skull, or I can draw the line. It's kind of right where.
Show me on your skull,
Okay,
so we can see what.
It's kind of like right about there, without the glasses. Okay, just below, or just a little bit below, or touching a little bit above the eye socket.
Okay, so from the eye sockets, and did it go around the head?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of give me that.
Yeah,
the circumference.
Yeah, the entire.
Wait. Both of you cannot talk at the same time.
Apologize, Madam Court Reporter. If you could just give me a demonstration of the total circumference.
It was circumferential around the skull.
Was the skull sitting essentially in its, let me rephrase, when we say anatomical position, we mean as if someone were standing straight up. All right, so from that purpose, was the skull completely straight up, or was it a slight angle one way or the other?
I believe it was angled. It was not straight up.
Angled so the back was low, or do you recall?
It was very difficult to tell because of the orientation of the ground around it.
Fair enough. Now, did you come up with a method of trying to remove the skull and the tape together as a group?
Yeah. We the crime scene people, Welsh, Investigator Welsh, and the supervisor, Susan Mears, were out there, and we talked about it. And my suggestion was that we go ahead and I would remove as large an area from the side and under the skull and lift it up and place it into a paper bag. At this point in time, we were most interested in recovering everything that was there without making any substantial changes in its orientation, because we realized that the duct tape and the hair mat were important exactly the way they were. And we weren't exactly sure what else was in that area of vegetation and debris around it. So I reached, or we decided the best way to do it would be to try and collect a large portion of that area, just not lift the skull up. So we planned to go ahead and lift an area to include the skull and the debris, and then put it into a paper bag for transport.
Let me show you State's Exhibit GK. And I believe this is in evidence as State's Exhibit 199 for the record. Let me clear the annotation. May I publish? This is in evidence as State's 199.
You may.
Thank you. Is this, though obviously you didn't take this photograph, is this a photograph taken of you attempting in the middle of removing the skull?
That's correct.
Right.
It looks like I had already reached down and gotten the outer areas, and my hands were coming together under the skull to lift it up. One of the crime scene investigators was holding a bag open so that I could just reach over and then place this entire pile of debris and skull into the bag for security and transport.
Do you have a recollection of approximately how far out from the skull you went in terms of your initial penetration of the ground?
For about 6 to 8 inches from around the skull. The skull is here in the center. I would put my hand 6 to 8 inches out to the side and then gone down until I hit something pretty solid, and then tried to scoop it up and then lift everything that was there to deposit in a large brown paper bag.
Okay, looking at State's Exhibit 199, there appears to be a slightly darker area around here. Is that sort of where you had removed debris? Is that
it would appear to be that way, yes.
And did you attempt, as best you could, to keep the tape in the same position in reference to the skull as it was on the ground?
The hair mat and the tape both, yes.
Just so clear, was it possible to keep it in precisely, exactly the same position?
I seriously doubt it, but we certainly made the best effort that we possibly could.
And when you said that was collected and was placed in a paper bag?
Correct.
And did you collect other items from the scene there that morning?
Yes, we did.
What other items were collected from the scene that morning?
We collected the plastic bag and the canvas bag that was next to it because we felt that may have had additional remains in it. And there were also some other long bones that were in the area of the skull, in the proximity, which would again be part of our responsibility as the medical examiner's office. So while they weren't part of the large area that we collected with the skull or from the bags, they were also collected and placed in a bag for transport back to the medical examiner's office.
So you said the bag you're talking about the trash bag or the canvas bag or both?
The trash bag and the canvas bag were collected again as one unit so that we could get everything that was in that area. Again, same thing, going down from the outside of it around and scooping it up and then putting it onto a plastic shroud and then putting that into a body bag.
And was that taken then as a large...
As a unit.
As a unit. Did you also collect some items of possible clothing, I think a pair of shorts?
There was...
There.
I didn't know at the time that they were shorts, but there were some items of cloth that may have been clothing, but those were also collected because we considered as part of that scene.
Was there anything else you took from the scene that first morning? You said the skull, the bag, the shorts, the long bone, anything else?
That's pretty much it. There was something besides the shorts. There was a large piece of cloth. Later learned it was some sort of a blanket, I think, but those things that were of that ilk that were with each other, they were all picked up and transported back.
To the medical examiner's office?
Indeed, yes.
And when you arrived at the medical examiner's office, did you turn all that material over to one of the forensic pathologists at the
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Who was that?
That was Dr. Gary Utz, the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner.
Over the next number of days, did you continue to transport evidence or remains from that scene on Suburban to the medical examiner's office?
One of my roles was to go ahead and go back and forth between the scene, confer with Dr. Schultz, with the crime scene people so that we kind of knew what was going on. And as they were collecting things that they believed to be bones or part of that scene that were possibly human remains, okay, those would be collected and cataloged by the crime scene people, and that included the people from the sheriff's office and the other agencies that were assisting, but under the supervision of the sheriff's office. They would collect those things, and then I would sign for them out there on most occasions, transport them back to the medical examiner's office for security and examination by the medical examiners that were working on the case. There were one or two instances where one of the crime scene people may have transported it from the scene into our office, but for the most part, I was the one that was going back and forth bringing the things that had been collected during the extensive search that they did of the area back to the medical examiner's office.
And you indicated your first trip, obviously we've just talked about, was December 11th. What was the date of your last trip? And if you need to refer to your report to refresh your recollection, that's fine.
I think the 17th of December was the last time I went out there.
And was the purpose of that to collect?
Again, to do the same
Some
thing,
more bones.
to gather whatever remains or things that they thought might be remains. There were a number of things that were collected that Dr. Schultz was going to have to look at to see if in fact they were bones, or if they were human bones, or if they may have been some other sort of wood debris.
You mentioned the Dr. Schultz. Who is Dr. Schultz?
Dr. John Schultz is an anthropologist. He is our primary anthropology consultant at the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office, and he was working with us. As a matter of fact, I called him probably before I went to the scene on the 11th, just to give him a heads up, to let him know what was going on, to see if he was be able to join us out there.
And did he show up at the scene?
Not on the 11th, but he did show up at the medical examiner's office that afternoon, and I'm not sure whether he was there when I got back or shortly thereafter, but he was there that afternoon of the 11th at the medical examiner's office.
And the area that we've been discussing where the remains were found, is that here in Orange County, Florida?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Afternoon.
Mr. Mason?
It's the only time I ever want to see you.
Yes, sir.
I saw in the photographs that you identified, and I'll tell court and counsel in just a second which one it was. I believe it's exhibit number 201. Did I see 201? You see that, sir?
Yes, sir, I do.
May we publish this, Your Honor?
Yes.
Did that work? Okay. Would you tell us what that is lying there in the grass or the right of way?
Which thing?
Well,
Point out which one, because there are two things that are standing out there.
okay. You point to one and tell me what it is, 'cause I don't know how to work this machine. I
Okay.
know what I see. You tell me what you see.
Okay, this thing right over here looks like a machete that was stuck into the ground.
And beside it,
And beside it is, I don't know, I just noticed it when we were reviewing photographs later. It looks like an arrow, but I didn't pay attention or notice that. Certainly wasn't anything that I put there.
well, did you use the machete?
No,
Do you know who used the machete?
no, I don't. I didn't even notice the machete until I started looking at the pictures a lot closer.
Well, from the pictures you did look at when you were reviewing, it was clear that there had been, no pun intended, but some clearing of all of the woods there before you got there, wasn't there?
Objection. Basis of knowledge.
I'm sorry?
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
It looks like somebody cut a path through some of the underbrush. If you look at the center of that screen, kind of like here, it looks like somebody had cleared that a little bit, but that's how I found it, so I don't know who did it.
Did you, in your review of the photographs, look at a long series of photographs taken by Ms. Welch from CSI?
No, I just reviewed mine.
Just your own photographs?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so by the time you got there, how many law enforcement and or CSI people had been on the scene? Do you know?
No, I don't, but there were several,
Bunch.
a lot.
And was the media there also the time you got there?
Not at the area of the scene. They were behind the yellow tape a block or so away,
All of them down the road?
pretty much.
So you don't know how many people had preceded you in that area to clear debris and move things around?
No, I don't.
You've told us in a couple of, at least 3 times, I guess, you mentioned a log, a rotted log.
Excuse me?
A log, a rotted
Oh,
log?
yes, sir, a rotted log, yes, sir.
And was that there laying in the area of or over the remains when you got there?
It was not over the remains, it was beside the remains, and yes, it was.
And do you know who moved that log?
Yes, sir, it was me.
Okay. And after you moved it, what did you find?
After I photographed it,
And then what did you find, sir?
I found a better visualization of the remains in the bags.
Okay. Now, I want to direct your attention specifically also now to exhibit number 209 in evidence. Oh, we have to do this stuff here. I don't know how you take this off of here. How do you take this off? Do what? No. I want to take this one off and put the other one on there. Okay. Mm-hmm. You know, we used to just have pictures and hold them up and take them up. Thank you. Then you stay right here.
No, I don't work for you.
Well, they don't mind. Thank you very much. Now give me number 209, please. Oh, there it is.
Sir, it doesn't make any
May I
difference
publish
what
that,
number
Your
it is,
Honor?
I can't see anything.
You can't see?
No, sir.
See it now.
Yes, sir.
May I publish this to the jury?
You may.
If I know how? So y'all tell me if I push the right button.
Yeah, you pushed the right.
Got it? Mr. Hanson, I'm seeing duct tape laying flat on the surface of the ground there.
Objection to counsel's opinion
Well, I'm
of the
going to
photograph. Your Honor, could we approach?
No,
May I ask the question, please?
finish the question.
Thank you, sir. I'm seeing that duct tape looks like it's laying flat on the ground. Is that correct?
Objection to counsel's expression of his opinion. The photograph speaks for itself.
Overruled.
What was the question?
It looks like it's lying flat on the ground. Is that correct, sir?
There is a portion of the duct tape that looks like it is laying on the ground, yes.
All right, sir. And is there also an edge of that you can see? It appears to be torn.
Yes.
And that'd be like the end of the tape.
I'm not sure whether that was the end of the tape or the fact that the duct tape itself had started to break down and the silver had come away from the fibrous reinforcement.
And that piece of duct tape, as it's lying there, sir, was it measured there at the scene?
Was it?
Measured?
No.
Were
At least
there?
it was not measured
sorry.
by. It was not measured by me.
Good enough. And when you took these photographs, were there any scales used to go with the photographs, like a ruler put down beside it or anything?
No, sir.
I believe you told Mr. Ashton that this skull appeared to be somewhat embedded. Is that your word?
Yes.
And how deep was whatever it was embedded in? Do you know?
No, I don't. There was the ground clutter, which consisted of vegetation. I don't believe that it was embedded in dirt per se. I think it was just embedded in the vegetation.
When you were asked to come there and look at this scene, do your job, did you know if anybody had moved that skull in any way before you got there?
The initial information that I received was that the person that found it may have kicked it, but that was...
Hearsay. Move to strike.
So,
I have a motion to strike, Judge. Thank you. And ask the jury to disregard the comment.
you done? On your watch, or what you did, then you don't have any firsthand knowledge about whether somebody had moved it before.
That is correct.
And then what you do is you gather it up, and as Mr. Ashton was showing us, republishing number 199. Can we have 199 now? Do you see that, sir?
Yes, sir.
May I show it to the jury again, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you know who all those other feet belong to?
Well, 2 of them are mine. I'm not 100% sure who the other folks were. I was concentrating.
Officials.
Excuse me?
You'd be officials, right?
Oh, yes, there was no one that wasn't authorized there.
And so what was, or what were the reasons you had for digging down and trying to gather as much of the material around the skull as you could?
The primary reason was to make sure that, 1, I collected everything that was around it, and 2, that I didn't move anything that was important, such as the duct tape and the hair mat.
So if the duct tape were positioned flat, as we saw a moment ago with the pictures, when,
Fact not in evidence in counsel's opinion.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
if the duct tape were in the position that was revealed in the photos we saw just a few moments ago, would you agree, sir, that when you lifted it all up, the duct tape would have changed position?
It could have.
And by the way, you mentioned some names. Dr. Utz was the on-call medical examiner that caught this case originally.
I don't know if he was on call, but he was the medical examiner that stayed to receive the remains when I got back to the medical examiner's office.
And that was on the
11th?
11th of December, 2008.
Correct.
Ultimately, or a day or so later, if I read your report correctly, Dr. Garavaglia came in. Is that correct?
Came in as,
To the process.
yes.
And she took over.
It seemed that way. That was where I was no longer involved. That was doctor stuff.
Well, now you went out there several days in a row.
Right.
You went out there repeatedly to pick up evidence that had been found by the various CSI folks, right?
I was involved with the transportation, but not the analysis.
Right. But I mean, you went out there and you got whatever they had from that day's sifting work. and searching
Sifting or searching of the area, yes,
Took it back to the medical examiner's office.
correct.
And somebody put it together.
Obviously. Yes.
But it wasn't you.
No, sir.
But did you observe it?
Did I observe it? There were occasions when I was in the same room when they were doing some of the work, but
I'm sorry.
but I wasn't there to observe what they were doing. I was doing my job.
And what was being done with these items that you brought back from this scene was somebody was assembling the skeleton.
There were a number of things that were being done as part of a process, and obviously reconstructing it was part of it, yes.
And was that process photographed?
Not by me.
Well, in just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Maybe two.
I'm here for you.
The log that you raised your hand, you said you moved it.
Yes, sir.
Did you photograph the whole thing before you moved it?
No.
Anybody photograph you moving it?
I
That
don't
you
know.
know
I couldn't while I was moving it, so I don't know if they were.
Okay, so what did you do with it?
Pushed it off to the left side in an area that we didn't believe would interfere with anything.
Completely away from the evidence field, or so you thought?
Yes.
All right. Mister, I have one more minute.
You may.
Have you looked at all these photographs you took?
The ones that I took?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Have you seen, you already told me you didn't see all the ones that other people took.
That's correct.
Do you have any knowledge about a whiteboard, like a possible 2x4 or 1x6 laying across that log?
No, I don't.
You ever saw anything like that in your,
No,
when
I
you
didn't.
got there, while you were there?
If it had been there when I got there, I would have photographed it because it shouldn't have been moved to once I got there.
All right, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect? Okay, may Investigator Hanson be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Investigator. You may be excused.
Thank you, sir.
State may call our next witness.
Raise your right hand and say out loud. Solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
Gary Lee Utz, UTZ.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us, please, how you're presently employed?
I'm the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for Orange County.
How long have you had that job?
Since April of 2008.
Can you tell us what type of educational background you have that has qualified you for that position?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology and an MD, both from the University of Cincinnati, and training in anatomic and clinical pathology, and also a year of training in surgical pathology, fellowship year of training in forensic pathology, and I'm board certified in anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology, and licensed to practice medicine in Florida and Ohio.
What is the primary focus of your present practice?
Forensic pathology.
And for how long a period of time has that been the primary focus of your practice?
Since 1997.
Now, are you, pardon me, were you involved in some aspect of the medical examiner's investigation of the death of Kaylee Anthony?
I was.
How did you first, prior to the remains being found, were you aware of Kaylee Anthony? Had you heard of her?
Yes, we were all aware of the missing child.
Now, how did you first become aware that something had been found that might relate to her and might involve your office?
I was in a deposition at the office involving a criminal case in which I had performed an autopsy when I was employed in Cincinnati. And Dr. Garavaglia interrupted the deposition and told me that skeletal remains had been found. There was a suspicion, of course, that this might be Kaylee Anthony. And she was leaving town and asked me to take charge of the case until she returned.
Do you remember approximately what time of the day this was on December the 11th?
I think it was before noon. It was late morning.
Now, did you dispatch Investigator Hanson to the scene, or was that something that Dr. Garavaglia did before she came to you?
I believe Dr. Garavaglia did that before.
So when is the next time that you had to do something involving this case?
Well, I had contact with Investigator Hanson while he was at the scene, and he reported to me in general what he had found, and that he would be bringing back some of the items that had been found. And I was prepared to receive them in the morgue and examine them preliminarily and provide some of the items to the FBI agent who was to transport them back to the FBI lab.
Is that one of the reasons that Dr. Garavaglia asked you to temporarily get involved, to coordinate that evidence transfer issue?
Yes.
Now, so what was the first thing that you saw related to this case, Kaylee Anthony's remains?
Well, there came in several bags, but one of them was a large a bag that contained another bag in which there were the garbage bags and the fabric laundry bag, along with the leaf litter and some of the remains, small bones, and fabric. And there also was another bag which contained the skull, along with the scalp hair and tape.
Did you, during your examination of these various items, did you direct that photographs be taken, or take them yourselves, of the appearance of various items?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, I'd like to show the witness states CM for identification. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, I believe this is the first photograph in the series of photographs after Investigator Hansen returned with the items.
And is this a photograph that either you took or was taken at your direction?
It was taken at my direction.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the appearance of the particular item that it shows?
It does.
This time, Your Honor, move to evidence states exhibit CM.
Just a second.
Bill, this is done.
Be received in evidence that states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right, Doctor, as soon as this comes up. Now, can you just tell us, just from looking into this, what you see or what we should take note of?
Well, there are, I don't know if you can tell from this photograph, but there are two plastic garbage-type bags with yellow handle ties. They're partially torn, and they're sort of admixed with leaf litter and debris, and laying right on top is a long bone, a leg bone. Okay. Investigator Hansen told me that that was near the bag, and he just placed it on top of there.
Let me just ask Mr. Perez to zoom in on the portion I've just indicated so the jury can see it a little bit better, and I'll remove the annotation. Is this the what you refer to as a long bone?
That's correct.
When you say long bone, what is that a description of?
Yeah, this is actually a bone of the leg.
The white object that we can go back to the original photograph, please. You talked about the black garbage bag. Is there also a sort of a white off-white object in there as well?
Yes, there is a laundry bag, a fabric laundry bag that is there, sort of mixed in with the garbage bags and the leaf litter.
Eventually, were each of these items removed and photographed separately?
They were.
Okay, we'll get to that later. Let me go to CN. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize. I forgot to unpublish. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
What do you recognize this photograph to be?
This is the skull with the hair and tape, along with some leaf litter and other debris that was received at the same time as the other specimens.
And is this the appearance of the items that Investigator Hansen brought to the office once the paper bag is ripped away?
Yes,
And does it fairly and accurately depict its appearance when that was done?
it is.
This time, Your Honor, move into evidence states exhibit CN.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence that states numbered.
May I properly publish, Your Honor?
You may publish.
Now, tell us just kind of what we're looking at in this photograph.
You're looking at a at a human skull that is facing the observer, and it is upright. And in front, in the lower portion of the skull, over the jaw and lower portion of the facial bones, is are several pieces of silver or gray-colored tape. There is also hair that you can see that is extending over the top of the skull.
Let me, let's go on to the next photograph, which would be CO. Is this, do you recognize this photograph?
Yes. This is the skull again, and it's in the same position. It has not been moved, but now that it is photographed from directly above.
And does it fairly and accurately depict the appearance of what it shows?
It is.
This time, the state removed evidence, State's Exhibit CO.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right, so this is a photograph of the same object you said from above.
Correct.
The items that appear to flow down on the skull, what are those?
Those are strands of hair.
All right. And can you point out to the jury where you said that there was a hair mat? Can that be seen somewhat in this photograph?
Partially. It is. It's down at the bottom on the
That would be,
right
well,
here.
I don't know how that happened. That's colorful. That would be this area down here?
Correct.
Okay. Things got a mind of its own sometimes. All right. If we could go on to the next photograph, please, which would be CP. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
And does it fairly accurately depict the appearance of the skull from the side?
It does.
This time you ought to move to evidence, State's Exhibit CP.
What says the defense? It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right, Doctor, can you just describe to the jury what we're looking at here?
We're looking at the right side and back of the skull, and in this photo, you can see the multiple strands of hair that go over the top of the skull, as well as a pretty good picture of the mat of the hair that is now at the bottom of the skull, and then toward the front on the right side of the picture, you can see the tape.
Now, just for reference, would the eye sockets be in this direction?
Correct.
And the tape appears to come around to the side. Is that correct?
Yes.
If we could go on to the next photograph, please. State's Exhibit CQ. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And what does that photograph fairly accurately depict the scene as you saw it?
It does.
This time you ought to move to evidence, State's Exhibit CQ.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at the skull again. At this time, it's more of from the rear and the left side. And there's several adherent leaves and some twigs that are sort of obscuring the view of the skull. But you can see that you can see that hair mat that is on the right side of the skull, partially obscured by that large leaf.
Now, your screen is also a telestrator, so if you want to put your finger on the screen, you can circle the hair mat that you're referring to.
You can see the hair mat is here.
Now, there seems to be some thicker objects within the hair mat. What are those?
Those appear to be plant roots. That's what might be my opinion.
On to the next photograph, please. And photograph CR for identification. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And does that fairly accurately depict the appearance of the skull? In this photograph, is someone tilting the skull in some respect?
Yes, that is either myself or Dr. Schultz is holding the skull in that position.
And can you just kind of use your hands to explain to the jury what the position is that's being held in? Is it just being tipped, or is it actually being fully held?
It's being supported. It looks like the back of the skull, the very back of the skull may still be resting on the bottom of the paper bag, but the top of the skull is being held up so that the face part of the skull would be perpendicular to the camera.
And the hands appear to be sort of on the sides and slightly behind the skull.
Correct.
Sort of
cradling
tipping it up.
the head.
This time you ought to move into evidence, State's Exhibit CR.
What says the defense?
I have no objection, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence. You may want to clear the screen of the last circling. That's
Oh, thank you,
still
sir. May I publish?
on. You may publish.
All right, so explain to here again what we're looking at in this photograph.
Well, again, we're looking at the skull face on. It's oriented on its side, so that the top of the head is on the left side of the picture, and you can see the eye sockets, the orbits. And then the next thing you see is the hair that's covering the skull to the
Doctor, let me stop
Right
for a
here.
second. Can we rotate this picture so that it's oriented better? Okay, I think that might be
that's a little
easier
bit,
for us to work with. Go ahead.
So you can see the hair here is partially covering the orbits or the eye sockets. That's the same hair that we saw that we will see underneath the skull and behind the skull, and then right below that is the tape.
Now, this part of the tape here, obviously we're not seeing this in 3D. Is that a flap of tape that's separate from this part, like it's flapping back? Okay, can you tell what that is?
The pieces of tape were attached to each other. They weren't loose.
How many
they were not
pieces
separated?
How many pieces of tape were there? Do you
I don't know. I don't recall how many separate pieces. I think 3.
but it was more than one.
But I did not separate them. Yes, it appeared to be more than one.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's go on to the next photograph. This would be CS, and I will clear the annotations. Now, do you recognize CS for identification?
I do.
And is this a photograph of the same skull from a different angle?
It is.
This time, and it does fairly accurately depict the appearance of the skull.
It does.
This time, you are moved to evidence states exhibit CS for identification.
No objection, Your Honor.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, what is the angle of this, or how is this photograph taken?
The skull has been tilted so that the bottom now is upward toward the camera, and it's a little bit difficult to orient. But if you look here, this is the bottom of the jawbone or the mandible. It would be this area. So you're looking up from this direction, and then in the front here is a portion of the tape. And then the rest of this, all around the base of the skull or the bottom of the skull, is the hair, along with the what appear to be plant roots and pieces of leaves.
Now, when the skull is tilted, as it is in this photograph, does the mandible stay in place?
It does.
Is that at all unusual?
It is.
Tell the jury why it's unusual.
Well, by the time you reach the stage of decomposition and a human skull, the mandible is not attached anymore to the rest of the skull, and typically they are not even found together. If the skull is moved, which happens frequently because it is round and it will roll to some extent, the mandible is usually left behind at some point. In this case, it's still attached because of this hair mat, which has these ingrown plant material, which is giving it a level of consistency which is holding the bones together.
Now, the tape that let me clear those annotations and we'll do some more. The tape that we see in this photograph that I've just indicated here, is that adhering to anything?
It is, the tape itself was no longer adhesive as tape would be if you were to pull it off of the spool. But there were still stuck to it in the corner small portions of the hair, and part of the tape, which is partially a fabric, was attached to that hair and had also slightly attached to the mandible itself.
Now, you said it wasn't adhering, I mean, it wasn't sticky anymore,
That's correct.
but yet it was still hair, and you said part of the mandible stuck to it. And so,
Yes, I think actually it was part of the fabric from the tape that was stuck to the mandible rather than the tape itself.
All
And
right.
you can actually see that, I think, in this picture, not so clearly, but in one of the other pictures, you can see small pieces of the fabric from the tape, as well as roots that had grown into and around the hair mat.
did you eventually remove the tape from the skull and the hair mat?
Yes.
And did you have to cut away some of the hair in order to release the tape?
Yes, a small portion of the hair and some of the fabric had to be cut. The purpose of that was to maintain as much as possible the integrity of the tape itself. I didn't want to pull it because I didn't know what evidence it might contain.
Go on to the next photograph, please. This would be CT for identification. Did you recognize this, sir?
I do.
Is this a photograph, another photograph of the skull with the mandible removed and the tape removed?
It is.
Does this fairly and accurately depict the appearance of what the photograph shows?
It does.
This time you move down to States Exhibit CT.
No objection, Your Honor.
It would be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Now, tell me how was this photography accomplished?
Well, we're looking at the skull now from the bottom. And the lower jaw, the mandible, has been removed, so you can clearly now see the upper jaw, and there are some teeth in place there. This is the back of the head here, and then covering the entire back of the skull and bottom of the bottom half of the skull is the hair mat.
Now, in order to remove the mandible, did you have to separate it from the hair or the tape, or how were you able to do that?
Once I removed the tape and teased apart the hair, the mandible was easily removed.
You mentioned a few minutes ago how unusual it was to find the mandible with the skull. In situations where you've had skeletal remains found above ground, not buried, but above ground, in your experience, have you ever seen a situation where the mandible was found with the skull?
I have not.
In this particular photograph, pardon me, on the right side of the photograph, all of this leaf debris, is that what was underneath the skull, or is that what was around the skull? Or can you differentiate?
Well, the skull was sitting on that when it was in the paper bag.
All right.
Where it was when it was in the field, I can't say.
So that, at least when it was delivered to you, it was under the skull.
Correct.
Okay. Next, please. This would be States Exhibit CU for identification. I believe we've now gone back a step a little bit where the mandible and tape are still there. Do you recognize this as a photograph of a portion of that examination of the skull, the tape,
I do.
and the hair? And does it fairly and accurately depict what it shows?
It does.
This time you ought to move down to States Exhibit CU.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Right now, as I said, this is actually going back in time a bit before the tape and the mandible were removed, so it's before the last photograph we saw, but tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, now we're looking at the skull again, and it's sort of been, it's now tilted down on its left side, and this right here is the right side of the lower jaw, or the mandible here. So we're looking sort of this direction. And here, what we're doing is we're lifting the tape to show how the fabric backing of the tape is actually partially attached to that lower mandible. And also...
Let me stop for a second. Let me have Mr. Perez magnify. Mr. Perez, if you could magnify this area for me, please, approximately. All right, let me get rid of the annotation. I thought that might be easier for you. Go ahead.
Yes, you can see the little strands of the fabric, which is coming from the tape, and it is sticking into the mandible. And then over on the left side of the picture, there is a little bit of hair that is also still adherent to the tape.
Now, by these strands, do you mean I'm sort of getting next to them? This?
It's over here, I believe.
Oh
I
my
don't
goodness,
know
what
how
just
that
happened? Hold on. Sometimes this thing has a mind of its own. This, and is there another one?
The fabric?
Yeah.
Well, all of this is the
Oh, okay.
fabric.
All of that. And so some of this is actually adhering to the bone of the mandible?
It is lightly adhering.
Okay.
There are also, mixed in with this are plant roots, which you can see here and here.
And the root you just mentioned, does it basically go sort of under the tape and then come out and around the mandible? That
It appears to, but I don't know what position it was in originally.
Let's go back to the original photograph, please. Okay. So as you said, in this case, you've actually lifted the edge of the tape up so that you can appreciate that. Does this also indicate that it's multiple layers of tape?
Yes.
Anything else of significance in this photograph?
I don't believe so.
We'll go on to the next photograph, please. This would be CV for identification. Do you recognize this as a photograph of the tape after it's removed?
I do.
And it fairly and accurately depicts the appearance of the tape after it was removed.
It does.
This time, Your Honor, move into evidence State's Exhibit CV for identification.
It will be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right, just describe for us what we're looking at here.
Well, this is what the tape looked like after I separated it from the rest of the remains. And it is the gray or silver tape, and you can see that there's been quite a bit of separation of the layers of the tape, and much of the fabric backing is completely separated from the tape itself.
By the fabric backing, do you mean this, an example being this part I've just circled?
Yes.
Now, was that tape taken into evidence and released to the representatives of Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Marked as KN for identification. Ask if you recognize this item.
This is an evidence bag labeled with unidentified skeletal remains and the number for this case and the date and my initials.
Is that the bag into which the tape was placed when you released it to the FBI?
It is.
We could have the next photograph, CW. And do you recognize State's Exhibit CW?
I do.
And is that a close-up photograph of an emblem that appeared on the tape?
It is.
And is a true and accurate photograph of its appearance when you had it photographed?
It is.
This time you've moved to evidence State's Exhibit CW.
You received in evidence the state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Yes, sir. This is a photograph of a label on the tape.
Yes, it is.
And was this label clearly visible on the tape, even in its deteriorated condition?
It was.
This obviously is the tape. Has the tape been cleaned of dirt at this point?
No, there was no attempt to clean the tape at all.
But so there may be parts we can see once it's cleaned that we can't see now.
Correct.
Thank you. If we could go on to State's Exhibit DD. Now, State's DD in evidence, do you recognize that as a photograph of one of the items that was brought to your facility by Investigator Hansen?
Yes, I do.
Does that fairly accurately depict the appearance of the item at the time you saw it?
It does.
This time, moving to evidence, State's Exhibit DD for identification.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at a fabric laundry bag.
And is this one of the items that we saw in the first photograph I showed you, sort of everything in a big bag, if you will, or in the body bag?
It is.
So this item's taken out and displayed separately.
Correct.
Next photograph, please. DE. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
Is this a photograph of a different aspect of the same item?
It is.
Does it fairly accurately depict the appearance of the item?
It does.
At this time, you ought to move to evidence, State's Exhibit DE.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
All right, so what are we looking at here? Pardon me. Sorry? Sorry. I'll talk loud.
All right, folks, let's move on.
Sir. What is this item?
This is the fabric laundry bag. We're looking at it from the side. It consists of a sack, really, of canvas-type off-white fabric. And the opening has a rigid ring-like structure designed, I think, just to keep it open.
Is the inside of the bag covered with some waterproofing of some sort?
Yes, I believe it had some type of coating on it that I don't know if it was waterproof or just resistant to moisture.
Next photograph, please. Do you recognize this as a photograph of the interior of that same bag?
That's correct.
This time, Your Honor, moved to State's Exhibit DF.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Okay. This is the appearance of the inside of the bag. Is that correct?
Yes, this photo is taken looking directly into the opening of the bag, and you can see that there are two handles, two fabric straps or handles on either side of the opening.
Now, when this was in the larger conglomeration of stuff, were there things inside the bag that were removed before this photograph was taken, or was this basically its contents when it was collected?
I don't believe at this point there had been much in there that was removed.
If there was, it was just debris?
Debris. And there are more things in here that were removed later.
All right. But it has not been cleaned at this point?
No, it has not been cleaned.
Next photograph, please. Do you recognize this as a photograph of the label of that item?
Yes, it is.
At this time, moving to evidence, State's Exhibit DG.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence as states numbered.
And may I publish?
You may publish.
This is a photograph of the label of that bag. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Next photograph, please. Is this a photograph of the other side of the label?
It is.
This time we move to evidence, State's Exhibit DH.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
And may I publish?
You may publish. Do the juror have a hand up?
Oh, I'm going too fast. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the prior photograph. I apologize. I guess I should check to make sure it's on.
It's about a 3 to 4 second
Yes, sir.
delay once you press the publish.
Sir, I'm sorry. I'm trying to move through them too quickly. All right. Everyone okay? Can we move on to the next one? The one we just moved. This would be the next one. All right.
Okay.
We can move on to the next photograph. This is a photograph of the garbage bags that were in the original photograph, along with the white bags and the other items.
Correct.
This time, statement moving evidence, State's Exhibit D.
What says the defense?
DI. I apologize. I need to change my glasses. This is State's Exhibit DI.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
I may publish.
You may publish.
And this is the garbage bag that was in with the white bag and the other items.
Correct.
Now, this particular item appears here to be, what was the condition of that? Is it knotted? Is it loose? What's the condition?
It's tied. It's closed.
Next photograph, please. This is State's Exhibit DJ. Is that just a closer photograph of the knot closing that bag?
It is.
Yeah. This time, State moved to evidence. State's Exhibit DJ.
It will be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
And again, if you just kind of put a little circle around the area where the knot appears in the bag. Was the bag, at the time it was found, untorn?
No, both of the bags had multiple tears in them.
Fairly shredded up?
There were large areas that were not disrupted, but each of the bags had multiple areas where there were multiple holes, irregular holes.
Next photograph, please. This is DK for identification. You recognize that as a close-up of the knot.
It is.
This time moving to evidence, State's Exhibit DK.
What says the defense? It will be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
And may I publish?
You may publish.
Now, this particular photograph, you said this is a close-up of the knot in the bag.
Yes.
Is that correct? Does this area reflect the sort of the opening of the bag had it been still intact?
Correct. That would have been the intended opening.
Do you recall approximately how big the opening was?
You mean in this
Yeah. In that
position? I don't recall. Perhaps a couple of inches in diameter.
photo? Okay. Next photograph, please. And do you see DL? DL for identification. Do you see photograph DL for identification?
I see it.
And what is this photograph of?
This is a plastic bag again, plastic garbage bag.
Is this a second bag that was in the same large grouping that that investigator Hansen brought?
It appears to be, but I'm at a slight disadvantage viewing the photographs out of the normal sequence, so it's difficult. It's difficult for me to say. There's no other identifier on it.
Okay. But do you recognize that it's a photograph of some of the items that were found therein?
It is.
This time you moved to evidence State's Exhibit DL.
What says the defense?
I believe he said it was a photograph of the items that were in the bag. He just isn't certain whether it was that bag or another bag. Still, I believe.
Objection overruled. Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may publish.
And this is just a photograph of another item that was in that same grouping.
That's correct.
Okay. Next photograph, please. You recognize what's in States of Identification DM.
Yes.
And what do you, is that a photograph of one of the items that was collected by Investigator Hansen and brought to the mental examiner's facility?
It is.
This time you moved evidence States of DM.
Be received in evidence. The state's numbered.
May I publish?
You may.
Now, what are we looking at in this exhibit?
This is an article of clothing. Appears to be child's short pants.
And this is one of the items that Detective Hansen brought in. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take our mid-afternoon recess for a period of 15 minutes to 10 minutes past the hour of 3. I'm going to ask you not to discuss this case among yourselves nor with anyone else. Any additional instructions on behalf of the state or the defense? We'll be in recess to 10 past the hour. State recognizes the presence of the jury. And does the defense?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to recess for the day. There are some events that have occurred that causes us to stop at this time. I don't want you to speculate or try to guess at why we're ending early. It's just simply we are ending at this time. Please remember all of my previous admonitions. Okay, thank you very much. You're excused for the day. You may be seated. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the media, Ms. Anthony is ill. We are recessing for the day. Neither the state nor the defense has any comments concerning her illness, nor do they want to be interviewed. I would ask that you preserve their privacy as they leave the courthouse today. Okay, this court will be in recess to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.